Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. I am back to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans, and today I really want to talk about sort of like getting into TNA. My initial pathway into getting into TNA back in the day. Certainly I stopped watching it for quite a while. So I might talk more about getting back into it at another point as well. Or perhaps I might even just talk about that time here in regards to getting into TNA wrestling or Impact Wrestling as it was known back at that time. But anyway, yeah, like obviously as many wrestling fans, and I wasn't a wrestling fan as a kid. I think I knew about wrestling though as a kid. I don't think even here in Australia, I don't think you didn't know who Stone Cold Steve Austin kind of was or whatever. But I'd never seen it, or whatever. I never really knew much about it. Like I see a lot of Austin 316 shirts, I think, here and there, and that sort of thing. And because it was a very popular shirt. Same with the NWO. I think I'd seen those sorts of things around. Here and there and things like that. I think I'd even seen some wrestling figures and things like that. I even think somebody even like had given me one here or there or something, and I was just like I played with it and I didn't really know who it was or what. Like I can't remember what it was now. But this is 20 odd years ago now. But anyway, or even more. Is it? I think I don't know, but whatever. Anyway. So I had some kind of knowledge about the world of wrestling. I knew that it existed, kind of, I guess. I didn't know much about it, I guess, when I was young. I guess that's one of those things as well. Like, um, the internet, when I was a kid at least, wasn't a very big thing. It was sort of in its infancy. I was a kid in the 90s and the 2000s. So when I was growing up, we didn't have much internet, and that sort of thing. And so, and like a lot of WWE stuff, we didn't get that here in Australia. So, especially not down here where I live, down deep in Tasmania. So it's not on the mainland. It sort of lacks a lot of priority for a lot of things down here. So it is what it is sometimes. Though I do know that they did it, many years ago. But that was already when I was a wrestling fan. But of course, as I was sort of trying to say, first I did get into WWE. So I might go deeper into that at another time, but I really want to stay on talking about TNA. So I got introduced to TNA through watching WWE, because I think the first time was like watching ECW there, and I think I heard the letters TNA, and I didn't know what TNA was because some guy, Sylvester Turkai, did a muscle buster on somebody in a match, and I was like, oh, that was fucking sick, like I didn't know, like I'd never seen someone do a muscle buster before. I didn't know what it was, but and I didn't know like anything about like the muscle buster or whatever. Or I didn't realize that it was a move that was like banned and effectively got the guy, I think, fired or severely reprimanded at least, because the fans started cheering TNA and whatnot, and things like that, because it was a TNA wrestler at the time. I didn't know, Samoa Joe, who did that move and was famous for it and whatnot. But that was probably like the first time that I think I'd been exposed to TNA in any form or fashion. I didn't really know about it that much. I'd only known what WWE was, but I knew what professional wrestling was. Like I think that that's another thing about what, like me as a wrestling fan. I knew what wrestling was separate from WWE. I knew that WWE, like in theory, wasn't the only wrestling company. I think that I like maybe that's because I somehow, some way knew about this. Was it Maui, uh, New Zealand wrestling uh, promotion somehow, some way. I can't remember the name of it now, but yeah, I found out about that somehow, some way. I think it was because it was on SBS, and I was already into wrestling, and I somehow heard about it that it was wrestling on SBS. This, um, you know, promotion from New Zealand, and I did watch it a little bit here and there, and that. So somehow I found out about it. I didn't watch it all the time because like I wasn't a hugest WWE fan. I guess I was just a wrestling fan. But it was tough to watch because again, like it's very hard to sort of get you know that kind of content and watch it without the pay per views or watch it without that sort of stuff. So you can't really follow along with the stories and things like that, especially when they culminate a lot of stuff at pay per views and things like that. So it's very hard to like follow that sort of stuff. So, but anyway, so yeah, that was my first exposure to whatever TNA was. I didn't know what TNA was, but I found out there was actually a team called TNA, a tag team with Test and Albert and Trish Stratus as their manager. So it was like somebody said, "Oh, that's the tag team between like Albert and A Train or whatever it was." Um, so I was like, "Oh, is that what that is?" I was like, "So why did they chant like this tag team that hasn't been wrestling for years name in this match? What were they like famous for this move or whatever?" I didn't know because I only heard about the tag team from somebody. Like, so I didn't know what TNA was, but I knew who Kurt Angle was, and I knew who a lot of like WWE wrestlers were. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't really know who every WWE wrestler was because this was like still fairly early on in me getting into wrestling, and whatnot. I still knew that it was a work or a whatever. It was a predetermined, I guess, is the best way to kind of put that, whatever. So yeah, I knew what it was, and like I enjoyed it for what it was. Um, so again, like then I heard that Kurt Angle, who was went to ECW for a short period of time there. I didn't really watch much ECW there, but I heard that he left. Um, and that was like the time that I started to hear that he's going to TNA, and I was like, wait, what? And they said that, oh, this he's going to this other wrestling promotion, and I was like, well, maybe I should check that out. I didn't check it out like immediately, because it's like again, like it's very tough to get that kind of stuff. So um, yeah, it was difficult to actually find it. Like I had to get kind of lucky. Um, at one point, they were actually broadcasting it down here in Australia, and lo and behold, somehow I got to finally check it out. I think this was a couple of years later, even, or maybe a year later, even that I actually saw, uh, you know, the first few things that I saw from TNA, and that sort of thing. So I think like one of the first things that I kind of saw there was I think Jay Lethal beating Kurt Angle for the X Division title That was one of the first things that I'd seen, and I didn't have much knowledge about Jay Lethal. I found out a lot about him, but like in that match, he was still a fairly young wrestler and a sort of an unknown wrestler. He'd been around and he'd done some stuff. Certainly, like you don't ever want to take anything away from somebody, but this was his like really crowning achievement to that point, and even you could consider it to one of his crowning achievements in all of his career. For the most part, really, like you talk about Jay Lethal, if you don't immediately think about that moment or the woo off that he had with Flair or whatever, like those would be his like top couple of moments that he kind of had when he was there, and that was like the height of his career realistically. He did some stuff in Ring of Honor later, but I'm not really gonna go too deep into that. Like that was good stuff and whatnot. But I didn't really know about it until like a few years ago or whatever. Because it's like again, it's very tough to hear about some of this stuff unless you're really digging online and whatnot to sort of follow this sort of stuff. Because again, you know, they don't have the exposure or whatever that other things sort of have. So it's tough to sort of know much about them. But I think, like again, I didn't like. I got lucky in some ways to see that, and a few other things. And whatnot. I saw Sting for the first time ever there, and wrestling some matches. I think one of the matches that I think I saw him first doing was something with Abyss. I think that was one of like the first ones that I saw him wrestling, and then I found this guy. Oh, actually, I think it was Christian Cage and Abyss were wrestling, but also like there was Sting and there was these other guys. Like I'd never really seen Christian Cage. I'd kind of heard of him. I had never really seen Sting. I kind of heard of him. Things like that. And then I started just finding all these guys that I had no clue like existed because I'd never, you know, basically seen anything outside of WWE. I saw like Jeff Hardy, who I had sort of heard of again, and then I saw him leave and go to WWE. I was like, wow, and he was in WWE before, and like I saw him re-debut and do his thing there, and that was pretty cool. And win the Intercontinental Championship and all that sort of stuff on his return uh, there, and do all that stuff, and yeah, that was very like heartening for me to think like, man, like these guys, despite being a lot smaller, they've still got a fairly big presence about them. And I'd never really heard anything like positive or negative about the company or the wrestlers or anything up to that point. I just sort of, stumbled upon it luckily and just knew somebody that was kind of there, i.e., Kurt Angle. That drew me kind of in. I was kind of interested, and finally, when I got the chance to kind of see it, I was like happy to see it. Unfortunately, like again, I wasn't very lucky to always be able to see it. And I saw bits and pieces here and there, or highlights, or whatever else, and whatnot. I didn't really watch week to week or even pay per view to pay per view. I just so happened to be able to see little bits, things like that here and there. And I wasn't like, I don't even think social media was that big back then. But again, I wasn't even on social media really back then that much either. So again, I just kind of like didn't really get much exposure to it. I finally started really getting into it, like just about when the main event Mafia was happening, I guess. So that was like where my starting off point was. And that was great. Like, I thought like the main event Mafia sort of rivalry between Kurt Angle and Sting was great. A lot of that was like really entertaining, and I really enjoyed it. I really like because I'd seen sort of Sting and heard that he'd been like mostly a perennial babyface, so a good guy or whatever. But to see him do this sort of not fully heel, but kind of character where he's still kind of trying to really push this agenda and not trying to be bad, but he's trying to balance out, everyone else who's literally being a heel, but he's trying to add another dynamic and another layer to the group. I thought that was great. I thought that was, really cool and whatnot. I didn't really see everything of it, like I said, but I saw a lot of great bits of it and pieces and things like that. So that really, again, gave me a good way in. Mick Foley came in. I knew about Mick Foley. I'd seen his match with Edge at WrestleMania. Um, I don't know exactly how I got to see that now, but I think I got it on DVD actually, and I don't think I got to see it live or anything like that. I think a lot of the stuff I just got to see on DVD because they released a lot of WWE DVDs, and whatnot, and that's sort of how I got to actually see a lot of that stuff. And then they started releasing TNA DVDs here, and so that's how I got to see a lot more stuff that I hadn't seen in the past and whatnot as well. Like the early days of TNA, the X Division stuff, a lot of different things here and there, and that was a lot of really great stuff that I saw. I know that's highlight packages and sizzle reels and whatnot, whatever you want to call it. So it's the good stuff. It's not like a lot of the bad stuff. You don't want to promote your bad stuff, really, do you? Obviously, but still, I understand that. But still, like you get that these are the things that you would want to kind of see as well as a fan, and even some of the sort of, I don't know, screwier things here and there that you kind of see, like that had a bit of a screwy moment, but then they sort of saved it or whatever. Um, I know this was a lot later, sort of to a degree, but like when you saw like the Motor City Machine Guns, you know, and Beer Money, and both referees counted three at the same time, but then they said, "Hey, we'll restart this match." That was great. That's a very traditional tag team wrestling type thing that's sort of been done for many years when, but they did that so well and whatnot. I don't want to talk about that too much because that is later on, but still, like that was a great thing. Like they did a few of those things here and there, like when they did, like I was saying, with Foley coming in and him beating Sting just by millimeters, seemingly to win the TNA title and whatnot. So really, using the environment and using the knowledge of not being dumb to, like, well, let's watch the recap or whatever to see what happened instead of just like, we're stupid and we don't know what to do. Well, we'll have to hold it up for a week or whatever, or a month or whatever it is, just to, whatever. You've got a camera there, so that was a lot of the things that I hadn't loved with things that, they really addressed it in the moment. Oh, sometimes it takes a few moments, but again, at least they address it in that moment, not like 3 or 4 weeks later or whatever it was. I don't know. I can't really give a good example from WWE, but there were a few moments that were kind of like that. Oh, we know we could have watched the tape or we could have watched the highlight, but we just didn't. Like, they did it sometimes, but very rarely. But whereas TNA seemed to like, no, we were just gonna, make sure we're doing the right thing. But this I guess was like really when I was like getting into it and like I finally started like knowing more about it. I knew a lot more about TNA, and I was now being just more a bigger fan of TNA than I was of WWE at the time, I think, because I was just enjoying a lot more of what they were kind of doing. Like, they had a lot of, even if I wasn't watching everything live, like I saw a lot of, stuff that I really enjoyed as a sort of wrestling fan. I sort of carved out what I kind of really liked as a wrestling fan. And I really liked this total non-stop action stuff, which is what they sort of, played themselves as. I didn't really register the double entendre, because, well, it's not that obvious to people that are outside the US, I guess. So again, it's one of those things that if um, and like I guess I got like the idea again of like the test and Albert thing. Like, well, maybe that's what they're talking about. I don't know. Like again, so I didn't really get that again. So again, I just didn't follow what the joke was, that it was tits and ass or whatever. Like I never really knew that for a long period of time or whatever, even in watching it. But I was then invested in TNA. I was like watching WWE less and less and less. Like they still had a lot of good things, and I would still watch them. But like TNA just had a lot more exciting sort of stuff going on. Like I'd watch WWE and I'd watch the cruiserweights over in WWE, and I was like, man, these guys are cool. And then I watched the TNA X division, and I was like, these guys are as cool, if not better, because they're actually getting, time to grow and develop and showcase that they could be, not just a cruiserweight guy or whatever. They're getting the chance to be, in there, become tag team champions or become, you know, a world champion, or they just beat a world champion in like Jay Lethal beating the world champion Kurt Angle at the time. It was like, that's really unheard of, like in many ways. Like that's insane that you not only beat the X Division champion, but the world champion at the same time, effectively. But, you know, and that was a really star-making performance, like I sort of said. But again, like you think about the gravity of that, that could have meant that he could have challenged. And I know option C really wasn't a thing back then, but he could have challenged, in theory, for the world title. But they didn't really tell that story, or didn't really go down that route. And perhaps they should have done, because it would have, you know, given something else to it. But yeah, it's tough to say sometimes, because again, it's like, well, do you want the kid to lose, or do you want, like, whatnot, this sort of thing. This is a star making moment. You don't want him to take that away from him. You need to move on to something else as quickly as possible. And I don't know what he moved on to, but again, like that's what I think was the best thing. Like yes, you need emotional moments and you need storytelling and whatnot, but you can't, stop a show. You need to keep going. Well, what's next? Like, that's sad, that's terrible, whatever, but we need to know what's next. The show must go on, or the show must, if you're going to do a moment like that, you have to end the show on it. Like, tune in next week to see what happens, or whatever, like, or, whatnot, etc. You can't just, do those moments too much as well, because again, like, it gets overplayed and whatnot, and then the fans, again, don't, sort of carry along with it, and that sort of thing. So again, like every wrestler that was there, I got to know, like, slowly but surely, and I really appreciated everything that they did there, even if it was, not 10 stars or whatever you want to call it. I still found that there was a lot of great wrestling every single week, and great storytelling every single whatever I was tuning into. But as I didn't really have many people that I knew who were wrestling fans. Um, Again, that's probably because it's sort of a small place that I live in and come from. And again, so I didn't really get much discourse and discussion about TNA, unfortunately. And maybe that's also fortunate, because, from a lot of the discourse that's been out there for a long, long time, it's all pretty much been just negative. And, like, if you're going to say negative things, and there certainly can be negative things said about TNA and whatnot. They've had some rough patches, and they've had some down points, and they've had this, and they've had things that didn't make sense or whatever, and this and that and whatever else. But nearly every wrestling company has had moments like that, or even long periods like that. So it's not a unique thing to TNA to say that they were booked badly or this didn't make sense or whatever else, etc. And it's not fair to just to say, oh, that's, this person's fault or that's person's fault. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, they pitched an idea and that idea didn't translate or whatever. And yeah, again, like, art is subjective. I will have to say that right away because, again, like, I liked The King of the Mountain. I liked the whole concept. I understand what people's gripe, I guess, with it was that they didn't, like, some people thought they didn't have to have this special match where you hang the belt instead of just pulling the belt down or whatever. It's a little illogical or whatever, blah, 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 all this, it's overbooked, blah, 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 whatever. I get that. That's fine criticism to have, but like, if they had have just done the same thing that the WWE was doing, like, I always saw whenever they did something that was even somewhat similar to what was being done in WWE, people would complain. So, to say, oh, they're doing the same thing WWE's doing, and I'm like, well, it's wrestling, like, people have got to wrestle a match, like, so there's only so much things that you can kind of do in a match. Like, you can't really do that much in a match. Oh, he's doing a sleeper. They did that in WWE. He can't do a sleeper in TNA. What are you talking about? Like, what? Yeah, what? What do you mean he can't do a sleeper? It's a wrestling move. Whatever. Like what? Like, oh, he did, this move that's the move of somebody else in WWE. Well, is it? Or is it a move that's in wrestling? Like the DDT, the super kick, the fireman's carry. What, like, they're all wrestling moves. So to say that somebody can't use a wrestling move, like, wait, what? Just because they do that in WWE, well, that means none of the indie wrestlers can do it, like, because they do it in WWE. So how do indie wrestlers do anything, like, and on a wrestling scale? They can't, because your logic says you can't do anything if you're outside WWE, because they do that in WWE, and you can't copy WWE, whatever, because otherwise you're just a copycat. So, but I don't know when I really started to hear that sort of negative discourse of like, oh, it's just cheap, WWE, holding grounds where, a few, ex WWE guys go when, the WWE has let them go or whatever, this and that, or, it's just a retirement home for ex WWE guys or whatever. It's funny or whatever, that Sting was never a WWE guy, well, up to that point that he was there, and whatnot. And it's funny that Scott Steiner had, like, his best work, like, since WCW there, uh, like, so it's funny to me that the guys like that, like Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy that went there, were lumped in with that. And then when they went back, it was like, oh, we missed you so much. We're so glad to see you back. And yet when they were away, they were like, oh, these grandpas and whatnot and all of this stuff. They were in the TNA retirement home, blah, 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 and all that stuff. Just doing stuff down there in front of two people and a dog or whatever and all that kind of crap, all that, you know, same mindset sort of stuff. I don't really know when and where that sort of, like, stuff started to filter through to me and started to, reach me. Like, I know it wasn't exactly then, but it did come up then as well when I sort of heard stuff about, things like that and whatnot. But you know, um, yeah, I did start hearing that somehow, some way, and I was just like, are these people like watching the same show that I'm watching? Like, I get what they're kind of saying. Like, I can see some of their argument. Certainly, there are a few ex WWE guys here, certainly, and it keeps getting more and more. Which, yeah, that's a thing. But again, like, and it's tough to sort of, you know, say again, hey, when are you going to push young up and coming stars? But there's a lot of young up and coming stars on that roster. Um, Throughout the time that I was really watching it, really up to about 2010, or maybe throughout some way throughout 2010, because I do remember watching some of the Hogan era, even though that I was like going, man, they're just becoming WWE, light, or whatever. They're trying to copy WWE too much, or they're trying to, you know, um, do too many things that put people in the position of being too much WWE like, or whatever, and things like that, like, or trying to make Abyss like the new Hulk Hogan, trying to make AJ Styles the new Ric Flair, things like that. I did like the Fortune stable. I think the Fortune stable had legs, and I think that could have been cool. I think like having Ric Flair being AJ Styles' manager and AJ Styles playing up to being a cocky heel or whatever, that could have worked. And him trading in the workman boots for the diamond rings and the Lear jets and whatnot, that could have worked. I think like that was probably, in my opinion, fine. But I don't really think that you know uh him needing to be Ric Flair or whatever, Biss needing to be Hulk Hogan and things like that needed to be done. Like, those were things that I just didn't like, and I think a lot of fans who were fans at the time really tuned out during that time period. I stuck with it as much as what I could, I think, and tried to gut it out, try to find the good in it as much as I could. And I watched a few things here and there, but just couldn't keep up with it. It was just too much. Um, and I'd already tuned out in WWE at that time, because I was just like, man, WWE is like terrible, absolutely terrible, right now, and I just don't want to watch it. It just like, when they pushed Sheamus and made him the champion, I was like, oh, this could be cool. Like this guy's climbed the ranks and like pretty quickly, and that's kind of cool and whatnot. But then I just like almost realized it to myself as a wrestling fan, like almost realized where that was going. I was like, wait a minute. Did they just put the title on this guy just to friggin' well put it back onto Orton, just for John Cena to have to try to beat Orton again? And lo and behold, that's basically what they did. Like, they just used him as a transitional champion to get the title back on Orton, and then get, another, 7 or 8 matches or whatever it was out of Cena and Orton, when they'd said, hey, they'll never wrestle again because this thing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, I'm done with you guys. Like, like, that's a smart way to get around that stipulation, obviously, in that sense. But why book yourself into the corner? And they'd already had so many matches at that point, even, and they went on to have even more after that. But still, um, it was overplayed, and it was time to move on to something else. And he could have done something else, but they just were like, well, this is the formula that's working, so we're just going to stick with that. Like, or whatever, like John Cena wins LOL, like formula, whatever it was, basically. Um, Not to say that there wasn't good moments that here and there in WWE, but they're just like becoming less and less like good moments, and whatnot here and there. So I just didn't tune in at that time. But and that was in 2000, early 2010, I think, as well. But like, so I was like sort of on the outside of wrestling during that time. I continued to hear a lot of like negative stuff about WWE and TNA during the time. Um, but for the time that I was there, I really enjoyed it, and I was like hoping that this venture, whatever was going on, they'd realize, hey, all right, let's tone it back down. Let's figure something that's either in the middle or whatever, or of where we want to be or whatnot. But I never really heard that. And then I heard that they were going through some tough times and whatnot and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, that's sad. I hope they turn it around. And I was just not like, I didn't watch WWE. I saw things here and there and like whatnot, and that sort of thing, as I sort of said, but I didn't really ever watch WWE again. I still haven't really watched WWE. I've seen clips and things like that here and there, like throughout the years, as I sort of say. But I saw when Jordan Grace went there. I saw when Joe Hendry went there. I've seen a few things here and there, like I've seen when Cody returned, etc. Like I've seen a few things. I saw when the Hardys returned, like I sort of said. I saw some clips and some moments and stuff like that, and I've seen reviews and different things and best and worst lists of things. So some things have come through, and I've got to know some of the wrestlers that I didn't really watch while I was watching it, and that sort of thing. The best and the worst of it at the time. But then somewhere, some way, at some point, like I'd heard of Alberto Del Rio, I think, and I heard that TNA was like revamping, and Alberto Del Rio was going to potentially be there or something, and that Jeff Jarrett had come back to TNA or whatever, and retaken ownership of TNA and that and whatnot. So I was like, ooh, that could be good. And there was this thing with like the partnership or a merger of some sort with the Global Force Wrestling thing, and I was like, this is a bit weird. Um, and it was called Impact Wrestling at the time, and whatnot, which was like they'd sort of like done that name change and whatnot, which was like to me and to a lot of fans, it was still TNA. So, but I kept up with saying, oh yeah, Impact, because that was their name. So I just, I think a lot of people, had to use that name because that was the name for that period. So it was just like, like if anyone didn't know really what it was, you just say, oh, you remember what TNA was or whatever. And they say, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you say, oh, well, that's what this is, but, just with the new name or whatever. And their TV show was also called Impact, which was just like super confusing since that was also technically the name of the company and whatnot. But still, like there have been some great moments throughout the time that I started rewatching TNA back from when that was and whatnot. There's also been some not great moments and moments and things that you go, man, I'd rather forget that whole thing, because it wasn't that amazing, but it was like a stepping stone and whatnot, and it led to bigger and better things, and then, like again, like I'm glad that I did come back into watching it, and even if I saw a lot of stuff that in the end didn't really care that much for, it being on my screen, I was appreciative to sort of, be there and be a fan again and get to watch it again because I'd missed it. I was glad to come back and rewatch it and get back into it and that. But like at any time then on, like I was actually on social media and that kind of thing. So at that point, I was really getting a lot more of the wrestling discourse, the sort of stuff that's out there. And the problem, like I guess I sort of touched on it here and there with it before, but one of the biggest problems that I sort of have with um, not journalism, I suppose, but sort of having takes on wrestling. Like I said, like I didn't watch all of WWE all that much during that. Oh, as I said, haven't really watched WWE at all. Even now that they're getting gotten a lot better and have kind of turned things around with Triple H and Control and whatnot, I don't think that I'll. I don't think I'll ever really get back to watching it. I don't know. WWE WWE never really did it for me. Like there were moments and times that it was great, like I said, but I don't know what it was. I guess it's because like I'm a very outsider sort of person to start with anyway. That I just resonated way more with TNA because they were this sort of renegade promotion that was this underdog that, you know, I really resonated with all that sort of stuff, that they would just like me in many, many ways. And, that's why I think I really resonated with them. And why I kept defending them and will continue to defend them and whatnot. Um, even with all the negative things that they do here and there and whatnot, all the things that I don't think they should do or whatever and things like that or whatnot. Um, it's incredibly tough to please everyone. Like, like I say, like, so I sit back and say, well, you know, did this really serve a wider palette than what I had, or a narrower palette than what I had? So again, I just look at it like that. I go, well, maybe it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but I hope that people kind of enjoyed it. And like again, I can be a bit critical, I guess, about it in some ways as well, because like again, I have been a wrestler or trained to be a wrestler and whatnot, so I kind of got a lot of the ins and outs of what wrestling is and that sort of stuff, and whatnot, that sort of thing. So it's one of those things that it is tough when you've sort of had the curtain pulled back and you've really gotten in there and really gotten to understand a lot of it. Now, I didn't really understand every single aspect of it, but I still got to understand a fair amount of it from that like perspective. So it really helps like inform you about like a lot of things, like why they do certain things and whatnot, like where things are going, and it makes it easier to predict things and think, well, why are they going to do this or why are they going to do that, and just like, yeah, where's, why wouldn't they, immediately do this? Well, because this, like you can't change the title too much because that's hot potatoing it. But when you change a title from one wrestler to another wrestler fairly quickly, like they did with Josh Alexander to Moose, that was for a story and for a payoff, like again. So that was great. It wasn't just, here's this random title change. It was, here's this title change that we hope, people will, really get behind our babyface and will, get to be able to tell this great story culminating, at one of our, tent pole events, in a few months' time, because we really want to establish, this 4 tent pole system type thing, these big 4 pay-per-views, and that really will help cement, those pay-per-views even further. Like, well, they're not that cemented now, but like they will be cemented or started to be cemented by this sort of thing. So that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to give fans not just two major pay-per-views. They were trying to give them four major pay-per-views and a bunch of other pay-per-views. And I know, like, they're not really pay-per-views anymore, but that's they're still marketed out there as pay-per-views. So, and you can still buy them as pay-per-views. So or PLEs, whatever. So again, yes, if you have the TNA app or whatever, um, whatnot, obviously you don't have to do that, but it's still a subscription that you pay for. So, or a streaming service that you pay for. So you're still going to have to pay for these premium live events or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, no. Overall, like, I like everything. Like, I don't like everything, but I like everything about TNA. Like, no matter what it is, like. Like, even the bad things, like I think Scott said, we're going to embrace our past, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, that's what it is. Like, that's, I've tried to do that in my own life. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you go, oh man, but that's like, it is what it is. That's what it was. You can't change it. It was what it is. What it was, and you can only like learn from it as best you can. And I even think like a lot of the stuff that they've done in the last few years has like been the best stuff that they've ever done. Like, even if you go back to watching some of that stuff that was between, like, I don't know, 2013 to 17, there was some really, really great stuff in there. But just like hardly anyone was really like watching. Like, so that makes it feel a little less and whatnot than perhaps what it should feel and whatnot. So yeah, that sucks, but it is what it is. So yeah, you've got to look at it as being like, oh yeah, that's a positive, like, of in a way, like, no company, no booker, no nothing, whatever, no wrestler, whatever, is perfect. Um, and that's what you've got to take away from, this sort of negativity and whatnot. I try to look at the positivity. I try to look at what can be done, how can it be done, to make more people aware. This is actually a really great wrestling product. Just like no one, not no one, but not enough people really know it. And those people that continue to just say, oh, it's, still bad, or, was bad, so therefore it's still bad, or whatever, um, you know, and things like that, or just put out videos, that don't really reflect the current landscape of what's going on, or just even retweeting or re-uploading those sorts of videos. It's like, well, that doesn't really reflect where things are at and whatnot now. So you're not actually adding to the conversation that is happening now. You're talking about things that, happened 5, 6, whatever years ago, or even more now. So yeah, that's not helpful, and you're just hurting, the product now, just to be negative because it's, cool to hate on or shit on or whatever TNA. I had to live through the AEW working relationship, whatever working relationship that was. So yeah, but Still, the TNA fans and the TNA faithful, we persevered, and TNA has persevered, and that's the main thing. That's what we go for, and hopefully we can keep it going. I mean, we've gone through the worst of times, probably now. Now it's just like we've gone through a lot of rebuilding phase and whatnot, and rebranding and whatnot. So that's where we need to be. We just need to be, you know, I don't know, like getting it out there more. Like social media is great in some ways, but it's also terrible in many other ways, as we all know. So, but yeah, even if we convert one person here and there just to check it out this week, whatever else it is, they see Jordan Grace, they see Joe Hendry, they see these people, and they go, man, maybe I should check out TNA. Like, I've never really heard too much about it or whatever. Or maybe what I've heard has been bad things, but I'm sure that's in the past or whatever. Like, surely it's not that bad. Like, I saw so many bad takes about Kazarian beating Hendry and whatnot. Um, there at Against All Odds. Um, so many bad takes, and I saw a lot of takes about him getting eliminated first and whatnot as well. Like, that's just heat and storytelling. Um, yes, you didn't 100% need to do it like that in the Rumble, and they're not Rumble, but Rumble, whatever it was, Battle Royal. But yeah, like that's that's gonna be as big of a heat as what you can probably get. So of course that makes sense. That's fine with me. But yeah, like no matter what, in the end of the day, we're all the same soldiers. I think as TNA faithful, I think like there's new people that come along that haven't really seen it or know much about it or whatever, and I think we've all got to be good ambassadors to the product and to the people that kind of float in and float out of watching it, because like again, the especially nowadays, I think the attention span of fans is a lot shorter. Um, you know, so having those short little things that people can absorb, and care about, and again, like that's what I mean by saying, like in a year or two or three or whatever, it'll all change, but the wheels will keep turning, like there'll be somebody else, hopefully, that a lot of people care about, and then there'll be somebody else that a lot of people will care about. But that's how wrestling should be in a lot of ways as well, because it should be a march of, well, who's next? Who's next? Who's next? Like, you know, you should obviously establish top guys, obviously, but you need to always be adding to that list and always rotating that scene. You can't just keep the same handful of guys at the top. You need to give them something else to kind of do to help, raise up the next group of, wrestlers, because the shelf life of those wrestlers that are at the top is just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Um, you know, and I don't want to say anything bad or whatever about the people there or whatever, but yeah, like that they know that too. Like, but Matt Hardy, like he did a great job this at Against All Odds. He got himself in some really good shape. He didn't really, like, he looked a little bit sore and tender before that, and sort of a little bit slow in plotting here and there at moments. Like, I know I don't think that was selling. Um, so that didn't look good. But like he got himself in good looking shape and felt like, man, he must have been doing some yoga or some, you know, some stretches or something there to loosen himself up to really get more movement back going for this match. And it's different to look strong as to look like you're stiff and just can't move properly. So that's a big difference. But yeah, like those guys, they still know that, hey, you know, this is probably, you know, could be the last year or last couple of years. This is probably one of our last little runs. We're just going to have fun with it. We're just going to do what we can do in the short amount of time that, you know, and that's fine. 100% fine with that. Like, I don't mind that they're only here maybe for a few months or whatever it is. I don't even know that it's going to be that, but and then they're floating off. Like, you know, I understand. That's fine with me, you know. I know that some fans would love them to stay. I would love them to stay too. Absolutely. But again, like if they're going to go, they're going to go. Like it's the same thing with a young and upcoming wrestler. Look at Eli Drake, now LA Knight. He decided to go to WWE after a few years being there in TNA and plying his trade and doing what he was doing and getting over, and seemingly like he was like almost at that point where, well, you know, might be pushed aside for some of these other guys a little bit, so might not get all the spotlight that I was getting before and whatnot, but I'll finish out my dates or whatever, and you know, WWE's calling, so I'll give that a go, whatever, and that's fair enough. Like, but you never know what's going to change, so you never know how that, you know, staying could have worked out. But it certainly worked out for him pretty well over there for the most part now. So, and he's like, again, even he's like fairly old, you know, and he's been in the business a long time. So I'm sure he's wanting to, you know, look to cap off his career at the big time and build that nest egg for retirement. So fair enough. I know the Hardys have kind of done that. So I think they're pretty happy to work for whatever they can get. And you know, I'm sure they didn't come cheap, even for a few months, or a month or whatever it is that they're going to be there. But they know that they've made their money and they know that they're going to, you know, potentially go to WWE to make even more money. So what does it mean to them, you know, that much to make, you know, not be making a huge amount perhaps over there? I'm sure they're on a 6-figure deal of some sort, even if it's a handshake, or they're getting a lot from their merch, even though I haven't seen much merch for them, though um um the broken stuff, I guess, will always sell, so you can just use their old merch if you've got any of it left. So, but yeah, I want to start discussions and want to reach out to more personalities, more streamers, more YouTubers, etc. And I want you guys to do that too, and we'll work together as we always do to, you know, get people's thoughts and get, you know, because the more broad we can make general statements about like where the company's at and what they could do to be better, because again, like everything's kind of art and that's subjective, so the more you can get like a broader range of opinions on it, the better sort of you can kind of get the in general opinion of where things are at and where they should go to where they need to be for people to be like, okay, you know, let's give this a really good go, because again, like, streaming is their number one area of revenue for the foreseeable future, and whatnot, and that's all wrestling companies really, again. So just finding that next level of streaming for them to be on, and accessed by as many eyeballs as possible, in that regard, is probably the number one goal. The next goal is, TV distribution being a bit better, and whatnot. So even though that's a media that's not as big, and is still going to go down, it's still worthwhile to have, and it's still good metric to sort of see where things are at. So um, they can still be very useful to have that, and even to just advertise on, um, you know, because some people can't, either don't want to, because of the expense, or can't because of the expense, or perhaps they're living in the bedrock era, the Stone Age, whatever, um, and they don't really know how to get this whole streaming fooey going or whatever. And it's like, oh well, I can watch it on YouTube, but same problem, I don't know how to get this internet thing working, and whatever that is. So even that's crazy, but still, like, there are people that are like that, and whatnot. So you need to make it as available as possible on as many different platforms, on TV, cable, whatever, uh, as possible as well, so that those people that are in that in that category can see it week to week. So yeah, I want to talk to you guys, and I want to hear what you have to say down there in the comments below. Hope you've enjoyed this one, despite how long it is. And I hope to have you again in the next one.